the Adam Corlick inverse. Such genius.
I love it.
What's up, guys? How's everyone doing?
What is up?
Hey guys, what's going on tonight?
Been a while since we did one of these proper style, I guess.
Yeah.
Doggy style. That's right.
That's right.
Good to be back.
Mm-hmm. Come with me if you want to live.
Well, apparently we were approved for some Google sponsored stuff, I guess, which I just found out because thank you, Dave Kirscher, for sponsoring us. I didn't even know that was available. They didn't let us know. So
Dave let us know. That's what's important.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know if that means that super chats are available now or not, but I guess we'll find out. I'll take a look later on.
Nobody send anything.
Yeah.
Just don't send anything. Dude, please, no super chats. I'll give you money not to do it.
All right, so I guess we're gonna do the going around the table deal again and talk about what we've been up to. Is that the plan?
Sure.
Yep.
All right. Yep. Well, before we get to that, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Brasso. Brasso. When you need to clean your cartridge, always start with Brasso. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first because I'm really fast tonight. Okay. Shut up, Bob. Shut your fucking mouth. I'm sorry. A lot of cool stuff's been happening. Guys, first of all, I don't know if you saw the tweet with the boxes, but every day of my morning starts with a stack of boxes that are about 6 feet tall. And people are like, why aren't you responding to my emails? Why aren't you making YouTube videos? Why aren't you being the people's champion in the public anymore? It's simply because for the past month I have been busy, super busy. But I'm ironing all that out now. I'm going to have inventory up hopefully by next week. In the middle of next week, I'll have all new inventory that'll be very deep. I'll have deep chambers for everybody. That's a spider. But at any rate, so inventory's coming. Updates on all the good stuff that's still coming. That all this extra work that's come in over the past 2 weeks has kind of held me up on my updates. But the advanced burner, I want to get out the door. You guys are going to be able to make it. Do whatever the fuck you want with it. I don't care. It's over. I'm also talking with somebody who might be interested in making pre-assembled, prefabbed kits based on some of the stuff that I have open sourced. This is just going to give the opportunity. This is just going to give sort of an official channel, even though this stuff is open source. Bob made kind of the ignorant argument, though it made some sense. That just because you open source something, as great as that doesn't mean that even though it's freely accessible, that everybody has the means to access what you're giving away freely, and that's kind of a good point. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to get somebody that I trust that I'm talking to. Hopefully they'll be interested in producing in some official capacity some of the stuff that I'm giving, some of the tech I'm giving away for free, so you can have an official means of obtaining it if you don't have the skills to build and assemble and all this. So a lot of good stuff's happening, a lot of cool YouTube stuff. Thank you, everybody, by the way, for all the wonderful feedback you gave me on the latest YouTube video. It's been up for 4 days, and I'm almost up to 5,000 views on that. That's pretty cool.
Why don't you tell people what that YouTube video was in case they might be interested in checking it out?
So if you guys didn't see it, which I seriously doubt that, but if you
for our audio listener,
for our audio audience, a couple of months ago I did a PS2 modding video, and I said it was the last one that I was ever going to do. I finished doing PS2 stuff years ago. Well, I got to thinking about it, and I'm like, the slim PS2 I've not done on camera, and I've really not talked about. And I still think there's some stones that have been left unturned with the entire slimline platform in terms of installing certain modifications and doing some sort of preventive maintenance. So I decided to do a 38-minute feature that is nothing but solder porn and wire porn and just sort of techniques that I've developed years ago, passing those on so you have a a visual you have a visual cue of what I do, so that maybe you can replicate that, and some of these old forms don't die just because I and maybe other people. I'm not saying I'm the only person that does this, obviously, but if no one's talking about it, no one's really ever spoken about it publicly. All these sorts of ancient PS2 techniques are sort of trade secrets, and there's nothing really secret about it, but there are certain steps that one must take in a very particular order if you want a clean, polished result. And that's all the video is. It's just it's a reflection of years of sort of techniques and processes that I kind of done on my own to make PS2 modding somewhat fairly streamlined and professionally, physically, aesthetically pleasing to your eyeball. So anyways, thank you everyone for that. Lots of good YouTube videos still coming. I'm going to be a little more freed up now. I'm going to do some cool AES stuff to show some of the stuff I've been deving out. And there's something really super cool that I just talked about today that I'm going to do that's really not been properly done. And this is like, I don't know, it might be one of the biggest sort of retro niche community how-to videos that might be available. Bob can comment more on that with his girth, but that's it for me.
Steve, you want to go next? Oh, go ahead. You have something else?
Nope. Just remember.
Can I go after Bob?
Okay, Bob, you go.
Well, I, with the help of Steve, have just. It's funny. I don't know if Aaron Welsh in the chat knew this, but we actually just worked on a video of how to use an oscilloscope for beginners. It took. Steve was nice enough to stop by on his vacation, and we put him to work because that's what happens. But we spent a couple of hours working on this thing, and then I spent a few hours editing it and trying to make it, kind of easy to follow. So that will probably be live as soon as this is over. It's processing on YouTube now, so that's it. I'll probably put that together right away, and I thought it was absolutely awesome. Because the last time I'd actually used an oscilloscope was in college, and it was like a half day or a half class course, and that ended with, yeah, but you might not ever use this, so that's all you need to know. So I was pissed. I went to a shitty college, so now I finally get to learn how to use one. At least when I say learn how to use one, I mean to really grasp how to use it, it's going to take a long time, but at least now I could confidently check the voltages and anything that I'm working on for RGB signals. And I'll start to move slowly forward on other projects that are scope related. So
basically, you have a starting point, which is what's really important. So you have a good starting point, and I just wanted to point out that I told Bob, hey, I could stop by and show you how to use the scope. I had no idea we were gonna film any of it. And he's like, he takes out the camera. I'm like, oh god, I have to pretend
Takes out the camera, he locks the door behind him.
Yeah.
You're not going anywhere.
He bribed me with soda.
This will only take a minute.
I did. When he came in, I told him to open the fridge, and there were 2 different types of soda and a Blue Monster waiting for him. So, there you go. I thought for sure you knew we were making a video, though. When you walked in the door, there was all a camera and everything already set up waiting for you.
Yeah, it was an eerie atmosphere, and when the camera came out, it was...
Come over here, Steve. Take your pants off.
Ooh, Daddy, no.
No, actually, I previewed the video. It's great. Even just from I used an oscilloscope all the time in college, and that oscilloscope is fairly different from the one that I have sitting here now, so it's great to just be able to go reference things really quickly and remember how to do stuff. So no, it's going to be an awesome resource. I'm looking forward to you putting that out.
Yeah, that'll launch. I think as soon as we're done with this, I'll just make it live. I don't know. I'm excited because I want to start to do more videos that teach people how to do more things. Not just here's a video on how to mod and a SNES Mini, teaching the steps on how to do your own stuff. So I don't know. And obviously I'm bothering all you guys for help with that. And thank you for helping. Even you, Zach, who absolutely insists upon, berating all of us and then taking your time and really doing a good job helping.
Well, Bob, first of all, I appreciate I appreciate what you're saying. But secondly, I'd really like to just ask sort of a follow-up. Where are we at with the wiki? And is that going to be coming out soon?
Yeah, I'm actually I'm waiting to hear back from the developer. So there.
Okay, thank you for the update, Bob.
What is the? Why are you holding bubble wrap?
Because he's laughing.
Because it's America. It's America. Gosh damn it.
Hey Zach, did you get that last shipment I sent you?
Thank you, you son of a bitch, for the fucking goddamn box full of pink goddamn fucking pink packing peanuts with a little battery charger that's I don't know, 2 square inches.
Yep, I sent a big ass box, and then in it, I had forgotten to give him a travel charger for one of the cameras I sent him. So there's this tiny little thing in a big box, and he had to go sifting through the packing peanuts.
Do you think that the USPS would take this box of this plastic container of goddamn Model 2 Japanese Saturns if I just put a shipping label on the top of it to send it to Robert Neal?
I would actually. Yeah, I mean that'd be pretty awesome. I know a couple of people that would love to stock those for replacement.
Oh, I bet you would, you son of a bitch. Anyways, carry on.
I got boxed by Zach too. Like I sent him something, like a bunch of things in a big box, and then he sent me one little thing in the same box.
I don't remember that, Steve. I think that's a figment of your imagination. But what was it? What was that, Steve? Just out of curiosity, what are you talking about?
I don't remember. It was like I sent you like 4 or 5 consoles, and then you sent it back, and it had like all the because I put tons of bubble wrap everywhere.
Oh, it was the OSSC that you were supposed to build for me 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's done. I've been using it for the past 2 weeks.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
God damn you!
You got nothing else on me, man.
Well,
So you better watch yourself.
now.
Steve, just real quick, I just want to say, you'll know what I'm talking about, but just wait until tomorrow, Steve.
Okay.
And you already have an OSSC, Zach. Let's see, keep that one.
No, I'm using. I have like wires soldered to it, and I'm probing signals on it. So
That's fine.
It's a good one for like examining outputs and inputs.
I'll get it later eventually when he's done. It's fine.
Yeah.
He was supposed to build it for me. Like I built it like 20% of the way, then I got tired of it. And he's like, "This is when you really couldn't get an OSSC. Like there was a waiting list, and it took 15 years." So he needed it, so I sent it to him. I said it's in parts, so I have to finish it. And he basically redid everything I think that I did, other than working the packages on. So.
You know what that sounds like, Zach? Everything I've ever sent you. Hey, I got about 20% finished. Oh, just send it to me. I'll do it this Saturday and get it back to you on Monday in 2016.
Oh, Bob, you can go fuck right off into hell. You son of a bitch. All right, let's continue with this, please. We're monopolizing the chat with ignorance, and these people demand quality, and they demand a Patreon from us all. So let's just continue.
Okay, so I said I'd go after Bob. One thing I was doing a bunch of stuff before the trip to New York, and like I don't remember much of what I was in the middle of it. There's just a big pile of crap when I came back, and I'm like, oh crap, I don't know what I was doing here. But one thing I do remember was I was looking at a Genesis I had. So if you guys recall, I think we talked about this on the stream, is HD Retrovision LLC confiscated Nick's childhood Sega Genesis for a significant period of time because it had a factory mod that Sega did to it. Well, it wasn't like in production. His dad actually sent it into Sega to fix a problem that had on his Zenith TV when he was growing up.
So cool.
And this is called like the Zenith mod. And so we had that for our HD Retrovision LLC had that in possession for a while. And then my friend Sean Kelly, who is one of the guys who runs the Video Game History Museum in just outside of Dallas, he runs a shop here in Chicago. And he emailed me and he's like, hey, there's somebody traded in a Genesis 2 that has the Zenith mod. And I'm like, oh, okay. We could buy that and I could release Nick's Genesis back to him. And I got it and we hooked it up, and I looked at the signals and they were pretty much the same And I just thought, like, because some model Genesises output double pulses during the VSync interval and some don't. And this one didn't. And I didn't think anything of it. So anyway, I gave Nick back his Genesis 1, and we were working on duplicating some video patterns. And I plugged this guy back in, and I was kind of confused what was going on. So I opened it up and I looked at the mod. And it's like double-sided taped to this thing here. I mean, I had an idea of what was going on here, but there was one little detail I never thought of that they were doing. So what this is doing is it's erasing all the serrated pulses during the VSync period. And if you watch Bob's video, you'll kind of see a little bit what I'm talking about in the scope video. But I knew it was erasing that pattern because that's more of what the Sega Master System outputted, where there was nothing during VSync. It was basically you're anding H and V together to get like a pseudo, not really standardized C-Sync. But the extra thing that this thing does is it also eliminates the first line or the first H-Sync pulse after VSync, which is odd. And sorry, Zach, I couldn't hear you. Are you muted?
God damn it! Sorry about that. I was just going to ask you, the first horizontal pulse. How is it omitting that? Is it ORing and then knotting it out or something? How is it doing that with discrete logic or combinational logic?
It's a really weird way how they hooked up a one-shot. So they're not just anding H and V. So like they're grabbing V from here.
Yep.
Which like goes to the cart. Like I think the VDP drives it out into the cart slot. But they're grabbing it here.
Go to the card slot, yeah.
And then they're cutting C-Sync that goes to the video encoder, and they're sending it into here, and then they're doing their nonsense with it, and they're putting it back in. But how they're doing the extra H-Sync elimination is they hook up this one shot in a weird way where the reset is driven by the VSync, and then they have the timing resistor and cap set to clear out one worth. So when it comes out of reset, it's also like clearing a certain amount of time after VSync. So I thought that was interesting, and then it turned out that they actually changed the timing on this one versus the one Nick had. This one also eliminates the double pulses. It has double pulses before it goes into their thing, but because they set the time on the one shot longer than half of a H-Sync period,
it kills them too.
It kills all the double pulses. So this one also does that too, which
awesome.
I thought was interesting because Nick's one-shot timing was only set to like 8 or 9 microseconds. So it only does that clearing of the first H-Sync after V-Sync, but this one is set to like 35, 36. So it'll clear out all the double pulses. So I thought it was interesting.
That's really cool, man. I didn't, we've talked about the Zenith mod sort of lightly in the past, but I always wondered, like with their combinational logic, how they are killing those lines or those pulses out. And that's just really interesting. I've got to admit, I'm kind of turned on right now by you.
Yeah, I knew there was some one shot involved in there, but I didn't know it was hooked up like that. And now everything makes sense.
Pretty cool. And that doesn't, obviously, I wonder why they didn't in subsequent ASICs that replaced when they started combining the VDP with other sort of processors and chips, when they started spinning up different types of ASICs, the way the VDP draws the screen and sets like the CRT up, are those issues fixed in subsequent VDP revisions?
No, the only thing that does this is this mod. Like they don't.
It's kind of weird that they didn't fix that. You know what I mean?
There's something with Zenith TVs where I mean, we can only speculate, but they had to do this to make them not bounce. Was it a bouncing, Nick?
I can't remember if it was a bouncing or a scrolling.
Jumble?
It was something like that, yeah.
Didn't somebody on Twitter say that they also had a PlayStation that they had to send it to Sony to do something similar?
We talked about that.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, so this was a known thing with Zeniths where they just screwed up unless they had a specific pattern around V-blank.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Or maybe just with 240p stuff around V-blank needed a special signal.
So could this factory mod, the Zenith mod, be used in any way to try to hack those Master Systems or Genesis consoles that have the serrated pulse issue with certain BVMs?
This actually would make it worse.
When you were describing it, that's what I was actually thinking because of how that worked. But
that's why this is really weird. Like, they make the signal worse, but for some reason it fixes the problem on Zenith TVs. We have to know how the Zenith TV front ends are made to even go into that.
And it actually kind of related as we were messing around with this was like last week or whatever it was. I revisited the Zenith Genesis on my OSSC, which I think I mentioned before that I couldn't get the Zenith modded Genesis to work through the OSSC, whereas all the other Genesi I have were working fine. And it turned out that I guess it was like something with the sync post-coast settings. So the default settings did not work with my with the Zenith Genesis, but if you tweak those a bit, you can get it working. But
right after
makes perfect sense.
Oh, go ahead. I wanted to add something, but go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to mention that because of that, I have to have multiple profiles on the OSSC because tweaking that post-coast setting for the Zenith Genesis makes it not work with the SNES. So I have to set it back down to its default setting to get it. Otherwise, you get tons of sync drops with the SNES, so it's kind of an annoyance.
But yeah, after we found out like all this data on the Zenith mod, that I suggested that. I'm like, change the post-coast. Because that's when everything started making sense, because that H-sync after V-sync is gone, so let it coast. That's what coast does. It has a phase lock loop that's generating its own H-syncs at a certain interval, and the coast means, hey, V-sync is a weird area that everybody screws up, so coast over that and just use your internal PLL to generate. Don't reference the H-syncs coming in, just ignore them, and because that H-sync was missing, I'm like, let it coast for longer.
Yeah.
So then that's when it started working, but then you had the problem with the SNES, which makes sense because that goofy SNES thing happens right after VSync on most games. So I don't know.
NES too.
The NES happens at a different spot, not right after VSync, so it wouldn't affect him on NES.
Steve, do you think this problem with Nick's Genesis when you were kids was the catalyst for you getting into some of this shit?
I
don't know. Probably we'll put that in the documentary. Why not?
Yeah, that's right.
The NES did a lot of funky stuff in order to, or the way it rendered each line, in an effort to sort of augment the performance of its encoded composite format.
Right,
which is interesting. It's different issue, but that's kind of interesting too.
It's a different issue, but it's the same with
right.
the SNES. It's just where that anomaly is
in time.
located. Yeah, it's in SNES 224p mode. It happens right after VSync.
Yeah.
So that's why when you coast over it, you cause more problems.
Cool.
Good talk so far. I got to tell you, we're not burned out today. I feel like everyone's doing some really good conversating.
Yeah, I was interested as fuck as that last one. A couple of people in the chat thought I was like passing out and falling asleep, but that's
just
really
just Bob's Ambien addiction. Don't mind that.
Oh my god, I have never done that stuff. I have seen people with a very high drug tolerance that got their asses kicked by Ambien,
like
wandering
Roseanne
around,
Barr,
sleepwalking, and
people actually abuse Ambien.
No, you don't even need to abuse it, Zach. I knew people who would occasionally pop oxys, which is way, like blow lines of oxys who took one Ambien to sleep one night sober, and then were driving their car around in the fucking front lawn of their house. And when the neighbors came out, they asked where they were going, and it was like, the ocean. I'm gonna go to the ocean.
Those people sound fucking retarded.
Yeah.
No, it was the fucking weirdest thing. So yeah, I don't fuck with that. That stuff scares me.
This is the type of people Bob hangs around with.
Yeah.
So Renee, you've been quiet. What you been up
If you
to?
knew who that story was about, you'd have a similar yet different reaction. But anyway, continue.
Number one quick thing I want to say is, I forget who it is, but somebody remixed my Phoenix audio adapter for Extron.
Mm-hmm.
My board with the stacked RCA jacks doesn't fit on some models of Extrons, because some of those models have 2 rows of the Phoenix connectors, and the stacked RCA jack is too tall to go there. So somebody remixed it with a 3.5 millimeter audio jack instead, which is brilliant. I mean, I'm kind of disappointed that I didn't think about that.
No, there's a use for both, though. There's an absolute definite need for both.
Jacob Proctor says it was him.
Jacob Proctor. Thank you, Jacob. I'm sorry I forgot your name. I hope you forgive me. So yeah, I think that's amazing. That's exactly why I released these design files, is specifically for it to be improved. And it only took not even a month, and somebody made an improvement. So that's excellent. Long live open source.
Well, that's the whole point.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you have to release the design file though. Like some people confuse open source with just being able to order things and not being able to switch.
There's different types of open source licenses, right?
Yes.
So some say that if you branch off your own, you have to repost that, and others say if you branch off your own, you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah, so the license I always select for hardware does stipulate that you need to re-release your modifications as source files, because if I'm interested in that design, I want to be able to take it and branch off on the improvement.
Gotcha.
Yeah, your motivation behind making it open source is for that purpose, so that's why you would want that in there.
Exactly. Yeah. The other thing I've been doing is I've been working really, really, really hard on UMD firmware, and this is a sort of a backstory on how I'm learning to code in C# C++ with polymorphism. So the background behind that is, in school, I was formally trained in assembly. I was drilled down in Motorola assembly, and I learned a bit of C. So I never did any sort of formal object-oriented programming.
Neither have I, ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
So when I started writing the code for UMD, I just wrote it like I always do. I wrote it as it would be C. I used an Arduino to write it, so it's in C++. But you can easily write C code in there and not have to really deal with objects. And that's how I was writing it for a while. And I sent out a bunch of units to some people who are contributing to the open source project, and a few of them mentioned, hey, you should have been using polymorphism and whatnot, and I didn't really know what that was, and I just kind of brushed it off, and I said, well, this is how I coded it, so this is how it's going to keep going. But then I started to hit a wall as to how complex I was able to make the firmware, and then I finally decided to listen to our great Lord Artemio and study polymorphism a bit. Yeah, thank you for that, Zach. And turns out it was exactly what the project needed. Every single function call in UMD was always, if your SNES do this, if your PC Engine do that, if your TurboGrafx do this, if your Genesis do that. And some of them were identical. Some of them were vastly different, like Sega Master System, because it has a mapper, right? And turns out this is exactly what polymorphism is for. And I'm kind of disappointed I didn't figure it out before, is you can, and for those who don't know, is you can generate the object or the code with, default function, which will handle most of the cases. So what I'm doing is I'm writing UMD with default functions that handle a flat memory space. And then the specific cases of consoles that don't have a flat memory space, like Master System, for example, can override the function.
Can you just for the audience who might be trying to follow, can you elaborate on what can you define what a flat memory space is for people?
Sure. For instance, the memory space in Sega Genesis, completely flat. It means it goes from address 0 to address 0x400000 in one shot, right? You have one window which is exactly 4 megabytes into cartridge memory. Whereas a system like Master System, the memory space is only 64K. Only 48K of that is dedicated to the cartridge, but you have to use smaller 16K windows into ROM, and then you have these registers that you can set, and you can select which 16K window of ROM you're looking at.
Very good.
So it's a memory mapped a memory space versus a flat memory space.
There you go.
Is that sufficient, Zach? Yeah.
I think that's good. I just
perfect.
Don't want people to be confused by that. That was good work.
So essentially, what polymorphism is enabling me to do in my UMD code is I can get rid of almost 70% of the repeat code that was in there. So then I have a base class of UMD which handles the default flat memory space for UMD, and then there's let's say like a Master System object, and it handles the very specific cases where Master System diverges or is different from a flat memory space. So instead of having this giant file where you look through a whole bunch of switch statements, okay, here's SMS and a bit lower in the next function, here's SMS in this switch. Now I can isolate Master System into its own separate file, and only the differences from Master System exist in that file.
Is it like this, René? Is it like if you're sort of to translate this into an assembly programmer's lingo? Is it like the difference between a macro, an assembler, and a subroutine, whereas a subroutine can be applied and the code only takes up real estate in your memory in one instance, and it's not constantly in different places, whereas a macro is taking up more and more memory because it's written several times. Like a macro, unlike a subroutine, is reproduced. You can't duplicate it in terms of God, I'm having like a brain fart. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying, right, René?
Well, let me explain it this way: is I have a base class called UMD, and it can do, let's say, a read function and a write function. We'll keep it very simple, okay? So if I declare Genesis, I'm going to say Genesis inherits from UMD. So it has access to all the functions that exist in UMD. So I don't need to redeclare those.
Okay, never mind.
Okay, but
I see.
In Sega Master System, I will create a SMS object which inherits from UMD, but those read and write functions don't necessarily apply because they don't work on SMS. So in SMS object, I can override read and write with a new function.
I got it. Gotcha.
You're able to use overloaded functions, basically.
No, overload is different.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Overload is when your function signature is different. So you could have a read that accepts a 16 like a uint16 address, and that would be different from a read that accepts a uint32 address. So you could have two different functions on that.
I understand.
And the compiler understands which one you're calling based on the type of the variable you're sending.
So there's two questions. Woozle wants to know, does this just help clean up the code, or does this actually help for performance as well?
For performance, it'll probably make it a bit slower, because now it has to do a virtual
It has to go in, that's
table.
what I would assume. It has to go in reference, so it's another step.
Yeah, but in terms of cleanliness, understanding the code and just making it more complex, it's a logical next step. I mean, there's only so much you can do with without taking that step. Like if I wrote this in assembly, it would take forever, right? So
But like the amount of performance you lose is negligible.
Right.
I don't think I'm going to be losing that much. It's just instead of doing a direct function call, it has to look up a function table to do that call. So it's probably a few cycles more. Right.
And William Clemens asked, is this really polymorphism or just inheritance?
Well, it is polymorphism. I mean, I'm explaining it as inheritance, but I'm using both. There's there's pure virtual and there are virtual functions in there. The code is open source, so people are open to have a look at it too.
I'm confused. Just real quick, just one quick clarification. I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm sorry, Renee. I thought polymorphism was a new pronoun. What the hell are you talking about? You know what I'm saying?
That's just. I mean,
he is Canadian, so there's all different words for all of that nowadays.
It's a language neutral pronoun.
I just call everybody people, but I think that's still wrong now, according to Canadian law.
Well, for the next 7 days, the Premier of Ontario is a lesbian, so well.
There you go. Maybe you'll get more hate mail for that.
Election coming up.
Yeah, and she's definitely out the door. So.
One last thing, Mobius Triptech said he does this kind of programming daily. So Mobius, maybe take a look at the open source code when René posts it and give some feedback, because that's pretty cool. But I remember now. Please remember, I'm not a programmer, so all of you are probably going to point and laugh at me. But I do remember a few things being written over the years that specifically was done in a way where it skipped some of the easy writing features like this in order to speed it up as fast as possible. And the number one thing that I remember was, because there were a few emulators like that, but the original DVD ripping program. It wasn't DVD Fab. I can't remember. I'm not going to.
DVD Decryptor.
DVD Crypt.
Yeah, there you go.
DVD Crypt.
Where they wrote the whole thing in assembler, so it was lightning fast to decrypt DVDs, whereas some of the other ones would take 3 or 4 times because it was the same theory of using some of the auto reference functions. Did that not make any sense at all?
No. I just think that the experience or the goal of what René's doing is that the performance hit doesn't really affect that experience. It's not like you're running a game in real time where every little thing affects how the game is played. He is writing to flash memory, and if it takes like half a second longer to the end user, it's like I still wrote the flash memory and it did everything else right, so half a second, whatever.
Yeah, it's still spending most of its time in toggle bit mode, where it's waiting for the flash to finish a writing operation. So
yeah, and that mine was more of a general question, because for dumping games, the code that you're writing, it's going to be, we're talking 1 to 2 seconds difference for the entire process. I just meant in programming in general for things like this. Sorry.
Well, do remember, I mean, I'm not disputing anything you're saying there, but at scale, sometimes those things can matter. I noticed Xenocrisis posted a little update today on their Kickstarter with a nice little picture of a certain utility that they're going to use to create their carts. And they were talking about, how if each cart takes this number of seconds and we're going to create 1,000 of them, this is going to take us 3 days with no sleep. And so we need actually 7 of these things so that we can cut it down, and it's still going to be a horrible day, but that's how we're going to try to do it. And so I just thought it was kind of, worth pointing out that it's possible that if it was like even 30 seconds where, on one go you don't really care, like, 30 seconds, I'll go, do something in the meantime. For something at scale, it could matter, but I'm sure it doesn't make a difference in this case.
That's solved with slave labor.
Yeah.
And Xenocrisis is the good game that's actually coming out. That's not the one that I keep mistaking it with. It's the vaporware.
There's lots of vaporware. Which one? Toe Jam and Earl's vaporware.
There was a couple. There was a couple.
Paprium is vaporware.
Paprium. There you go. The one that my Twitter feed gets spammed by.
No,
like
wait a minute,
5
wait a
people.
minute, wait a minute. Do we know has that in fact been substantiated? That is, as a matter of fact, total vaporware, or is that just conjecture?
That's my gut feeling.
It's my conjecture.
It's my fact.
Yeah.
Okay, Adam, take it easy.
Yeah, they came out with a few statements when people complained a few months ago, but they've gone radio silent again. So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Corlick, get it? You didn't get it.
Well, Renee said figure it out a couple minutes ago, and I was like, shit, we're gonna owe royalties on that one. There goes our sponsored channel.
Is that trademark cut?
I don't know.
Nothing like sponsors getting in the way.
Hey, I got mine too.
All right, I guess I'll wrap up the individual topics. I'm not going to talk about anything technical because I've been unemployed.
You're just a cheerleader?
Oh, yeah, that's right. I've been unemployed for the last couple of weeks. I'm between jobs, and so while I've been unemployed, I've been using that time to beat it as frequently as possible, just nonstop beating it.
Yes, sir.
So I wanted to talk about a few games that I've beat it recently that I think are cool, and one that's not cool. Yeast Origin, beat that twice recently. Although if you know this game, you need to beat it 3 times for a true beat it.
It's definitely a beat it game.
Yeah.
3 times in the same day?
You don't have to beat it 3 times in the same day. You might get a little worn out.
Yeah, that could be hard.
Yeah, it could be. After 3 times, maybe not anymore though.
It's not a rent it, don't return it, right?
Yeah, this is a good game though. So you play with different characters, and after you beat it with the 2 original characters, you unlock a 3rd one, and then you can get the true ending, which I'm saving for when Steve comes to visit. We're gonna go to Too Many Games together, and then we'll also get the true ending on this. The other game that I've recently beat it was Uncharted 2 from the Uncharted collection.
No spoilers, please. I want to finish that.
Yeah, no spoilers. But I just want to say, like, Uncharted 1 was fun, but it pretty repetitive. Like, it kind of, you get stuck in that meme of hide behind something and then pop out and shoot and then hide again. Uncharted 2 was a lot more in depth, a lot more puzzle solving, and it still's got the hide behind a thing and then shoot at people, but it was a way more cinematic. Just amazing game, awesome story. So yeah, definitely give that one a shot. The next one that I'm pretty disappointed about that I have stopped playing, and I'll preface this with saying that I am probably one of the biggest fans of the original Bit Trip Runner. Runner 3 just came out, and I got it right away, and I'm not a fan. I stopped after the first world. They did way too much to it, I guess. There's like all these sorts of 3D camera tricks that really annoy me. Just like all of a sudden the camera's behind you and it's not a side scroller anymore.
Nick, those who aren't familiar with that series like me, what kind of video game is that?
So the original is just a straight running game with a start and finish, and it's the type of game where one mistake and you're back to the beginning of the game. Or back to the beginning of the level. And so you have to do the level perfectly in one shot. It's dodging objects, ducking, but it's doing the running for you, almost like an infinite runner, but
kind of like Back to the Future for the NES.
I didn't play that game, but sure.
Okay. What a loser. Whatever.
But the first game is super difficult, super technical, and was like one of my favorite games. And then this one, Runner 2 came out for Wii U, and that one's pretty good, just a little easier than the original. This one, I mean, it's just, there's vehicles and the retro levels suck. I don't know. I stopped it. I couldn't
Being
play
pretty
it
harsh,
anymore.
Nick.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it.
They tried too hard.
Yeah, I think they were pressured to just keep expanding upon what they had already created, and the beauty of the original game was its simplicity. Like, I don't know, it's just something about that original game is just so awesome. So if you haven't played the original one,
it was awesome.
Great.
We played that so much.
Yeah. And now I'm in the middle of The Last Guardian, which so far I love. It's by the same people that did Eco, which great game, and Shadow of the Colossus, one of the best games ever. And this one so far I'm really liking. They really know how to like emotionally suck you into these titles. Like that's this studio's specialty is like you get attached to the characters. And this one's great, and I'm like terrified of the ending. So,
Eco was on PS2, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I remember when I first saw that game running on PS2, I was blown away by how good it looked.
Oh yeah.
That was the first time I remember seeing the PS2 on a screen and going, "Oh my God, this is amazing! How will this end up looking shitty when they come out with the PS3?" Right?
Yeah. This one looks. This one really looks like almost like a Miyazaki movie in a way. I mean, it's got a very nice art style. Like all their games, the controls and camera can be shitty at times, but it doesn't. Like you can get past it and enjoy the puzzle solving and the story and the art, and it's awesome.
So your reviews for everything are beat it games, and then Runner 3 is a go outside and pound yourself in the nuts.
Yeah, because that'll be more fun.
More fun playing that game.
I'm going to start my new job next week, and I'll be on a flight, so I may take the Switch with me and just play Runner on that trip.
You go.
To waste time, but it's like not something I'm super excited about or looking forward to.
Why? Why is that, Nick?
It's not fun. I don't know. The fun has been stripped out of it in exchange for flashy gimmicks.
I'm sorry to hear that, Nick.
When I was on my break, I'd been beating it a lot, and I decided I just wanted to stay off social media for a while, just take a break from everything. So I decided to save all my beat-its for one video, and a buddy of mine's coming over, hopefully in a few weeks, and we're just going to talk about all the games we'd beaten this year, because he had recommended one to me that I hated with a passion. But the one that I'll say now that because I'm not even going to beat it, is Fox and Forests, the one that just came out, is fucking terrible. I can't, and then I bought it, so I'm like, all right, let me just give it a chance.
What system is that game for? I haven't even heard of it.
The Switch. It's a retro style game, and it's they have a bunch of retro references in it that they're trying to be cute, but it's not. And that's not what bothers me though. I hope this isn't a spoiler. I don't think it's a spoiler, but for a lot of games, think of all of the new Super Mario Brothers, right? You beat it. You beat each level, and then if you want, you go back and get all the coins and the extra stuff. But you could just go through and beat it if you want. So this game, each level is long. It's 3 or 4 new Super Mario Brothers levels in one, and each one you have to continuously go back and play before you can move on to the next section, because you have to get certain things and then go back and get an item, and then go play it again because certain things you couldn't get until you got that item. So it forces you to play the same 3 long, boring levels over and over and over again. So I'm not even going to finish it. That one that sucks.
Sounds like they MMORPG'd it.
Yeah, well, I don't understand that one, but okay.
Well, they just made you do boring tasks that you don't want to do, and that's the game.
They probably went to release it and somebody said it's too short, so they said, well, how can we make it longer without spending any money?
I noticed that the elves in level 3 are the same the dwarves in level 7. Just render them a different color.
And it's the only cool feature I like is that every time you pass a save point in the level, if you want to save, it charges you coins. So that is kind of a neat thing. Do I want to save my coins? Do I want to not? That was a neat thing I could do without, to be honest. But
it's like Earthbound.
I still never played that one.
Don't ruin it. Don't ruin it for them.
Earthbound makes you pay to save.
Yeah. So yeah, that's I will not be beating that game. I will never even load that one again.
Well,
Okay.
alrighty. Let's move on to group topics. But before we do that, I want to say thank you to our sponsors over at Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper, who bought me this shirt, official member of the Pepper Pack, personalized too.
No shit.
Oh shit.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's what you get for being part of the Pepper Pack.
Official member of the Pepper Pack. That is, we are in a podcast filled with nerd talk, and that is by far the nerdiest, dorkiest thing that's come out of any of our mouths tonight.
Let me finish reading the spot, Bob. Dr. Pepper. Because water tastes like shit.
Yes, sir.
That's true. That's right.
Actually, I'm super glad my grocery store didn't have Dr. Pepper 10 for a good while, and it was just a fact that they were moving the soda aisle to a different aisle, and now it's back. So thank God, Dr. Pepper 10. Back in business. All right, what are we doing for group topics? CRT videos? You want to start with that?
Oh,
Jesus Christ, of Latter-day Saints. Yeah, we can. I'll
wait,
start
hold
with
on,
this.
hold on. Can I just give a short preface and then just take it on from here, Zach? We're going to be pretty critical of things because it involves safety. So we've talked a lot about bad modding, good modding, and at the end of the day, like, the worst thing that could happen is you break your consoles. So no disrespect to the people who made the videos. Maybe you didn't know better, but we're actually about to talk about things that could potentially kill you. And that's not like scary news tease. It's not tinfoil hat, like, oh, Bob's being paranoid. So, fire away, Zach, but please understand that this is deserved because I don't even want to spoil it. You go.
So here's what happened today. I don't know. Bob doesn't understand the English language, but here's what happened today. I was sitting on Skype, nuking my corn dog, and Bob, we were talking about something that might be happening, and Bob sent some videos to me in our secret group chat that no one else is allowed to join, so don't ask. And Bob's like, "What do you think about these?" And I looked at them and I watched them. And the first video that I watched was a video concerning safety when working on CRT displays, more specifically PVMs and BVMs. And the video was by this guy who goes by Retrotech on YouTube. And I think the videos are rather new. And he was handling the CRT and he was talking about, the high voltage section of these CRT systems. And he was talking about the flyback transformer and the anode cup that energizes the tube. And he basically said in the video that you can freely make contact with the anode cup because it's rubber and it's not going to shock you. And here he is. He's touching this anode cup with a TV with a CRT that is, for all intents and purposes, has not been discharged properly. And let me just tell you guys, let me tell everybody, so let me just make this crystal unequivocally clear. Take it from somebody who's worked on CRTs for a decade. You treat it like a loaded or an unloaded fucking weapon. You never blindly make contact with these high voltage systems. Just because it's rubber doesn't mean anything. Let me tell you about the rubber parts on what happens to these rubber parts on these CRTs. First of all, the flyback transformer is potted and it's encased in a rubber shell. You have an anode lead that's a big, thick black wire that goes all the way up to the back of the tube, and it has this large circular rubber suction cup that fits into the CRT that energizes the system. High voltage and rubber, over time, the heat can cause this rubber to crack and to break up. Some people report their televisions make a cracking or popping and they kind of surge after, 15, 20-year-old TVs. That's because this rubber has cracked from the years of high voltage and heat, and current is leaking. So don't ever, under any fucking circumstances, touch a CRT's anode cup, touch the flyback transformer, or touch any of those high voltage systems. I'm not trying to be mean to this guy. It's not like a funny modding video where I critique somebody. This could kill you, and this could end somebody's life. So let's not, it's nothing to, I'm not joking about it, and I'm not trying to be funny about it. This is serious. This is another reason why I stopped participating in those television RGB mod threads years ago, because somebody emailed me because they hurt themselves, and I didn't want any part of that. These videos are incredibly irresponsible. I don't mean to offend this person, but it's clear that he hasn't the faintest idea of what he's talking about. And I really encourage people to not follow the advice or the practices that are in that safety video, at least from what I saw. These are high voltage systems. Anybody worth their salt in the CRT business will tell you to never play with that stuff and to never make frivolous contact with these high voltage sections and systems on a CRT. That's 101 stuff. And that's, as far as that video goes, that's all I have to say. It's patently irresponsible and bad advice. Not
So to
trying
put
to be
it
a
in
dick,
perspective,
but that's just
though,
what it is.
when people who work on the high voltage lines, every day, part of their routine is they take their gloves and they put it over like a thing of compressed air and squeeze it like a balloon, and then depend if they actually see and check to see if there's any air leaks at all. Doesn't matter if it's like in the back of the glove or on the fingers, and if it is, they cut the fingers off and throw the gloves off, because any kind of space in that rubber, the voltage can go in. And I mean, if you're actually working on the high voltage lines, it will kill you. But I mean, this is not a joke. This is not something that's like, I can't believe that. And this is obviously why I haven't put out any CRT modding videos at all, because I just can't believe somebody would give that advice. That's insane.
High voltage arcing is real. It happens all the time in these old systems. And the reason high voltage arcing happens off the flyback transformer as it energizes that tube is because the rubber and the integrity of the surface of this entire section has become compromised. And current is going to leak out and arc to other things that it's attracted to. That could be your hand, that could be your penis, that could be anything. And to say in a video that, I'm paraphrasing, but it's okay to touch this because it's rubber, and here's his hand all over the back of it, just flipping around. My heart seriously skipped 2-3 beats. A, I was praying that the damn thing was properly discharged, and B, if it wasn't properly discharged, he was literally playing Russian roulette. I don't, like I said, I'm not trying to be an asshole, but you're fucking with people, the safety of people, and I don't do that, and I don't fuck around with that. Period.
Yeah,
Period.
I've seen Jose when he pops the back off of those, he'll discharge it, and then he takes the screwdriver, the tool that he made that's grounded, and he doesn't grab, even though it's popped off and even though it's discharged, he still doesn't grab it with his hand. He takes the screwdriver and knocks it out of the way just to be safe. Like basic safety practices here.
I think I know why he says that, and I think I know why he was frivolously touching it. In a lot, and not all, but in a lot of later model CRTs, in the anode circuit, in the anode lead, there's a bleeding circuit with several resistors, several mega ohm resistors that will bleed off and discharge the tube to the frame when the set is powered off. It does this every time you power it off. Voltage, the current comes through the bleeding circuit. It disperses into the metal chassis, and the tube effectively becomes discharged. But that is akin to treating every weapon that you think is unloaded as an unloaded weapon. I mean, that's ridiculous. First of all, it's just not every CRT has this bleeding circuit. And so if you treat every CRT as if it does, and you're just touching stuff, one day you're going to get a hold of something that doesn't have that. Or it's possible that you could, and you're going to get fucked up, man. You're going to get fucked.
So, can I ask you what you think the motivation is for doing, like, demonstrating that? Is that an attempt to be like, don't be afraid of this stuff? Anybody could do this? And is
God,
that
I hope not.
advice, like, just not good?
Well, the language in that section of the safety video, and just as kind of you described, is essentially that. It's, guys, it's nothing to be afraid. The way the language I perceived it as, this is nothing to worry about as long as you're careful. As long as you're careful and you follow some basics here, you'll be okay. And here's his hand just touching, just kind of just straddling the anode cup, and I'm just and he's just like, it's not a big deal. Just be careful. Just know what you're doing. And I'm like, but you don't have any idea. Listen to what you're telling people. Listen to what you're telling people.
So I don't think you can make warnings for this without like telling people what they shouldn't watch, right? So I mean, I know you don't want to like call this out, but I guess people want to. Don't people in the chat want to know like what video that this is? Just don't follow this video.
Well, he named the channel. The channel's Retro Tech. He doesn't have that many subscribers, fortunately, so a ton of people won't be following this. So maybe 100 people will die, but it's relatively small.
So René, you were gonna say something, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's all. In my opinion, this guy can open his CRT and kill himself. I really don't care, but the fact that he puts it on YouTube and tells people that it's okay, that's the major problem, right? That's
what should be done from here then? Like what?
Well, I mean, obviously that video and all of that video and all of his advice should be totally discredited, and people should obviously be warned by that. I'm not saying that, but the problem is when you do that, and even if you're trying to be extremely civil and diplomatic, people automatically assert that you're just trying to character assassinate somebody for whatever reason. And no one is name called. No one has said anything. Nobody has said anything disparaging about this whoever the fuck this guy is. But his material is downright wrong and erroneous and just and ignorant it's very irresponsible. It's very irresponsible. It's not like somebody who's okay. Let me show you how to mod this. Now, don't be afraid of hot glue. Wires will break in shipping. Let me just dump all that. We can make fun of that, but this is no game. This is not something. This isn't funny.
So I like
funny.
Go
I like
ahead.
to, yeah. See, when I got this Sony PVM about 2 years ago, and the gun alignments was all wrong in it when I got it. So first thing I did is I wanted to figure out how to do that calibration. I looked a bit online, and there's not a whole lot of good information out there, right? So I mean, number one is I don't think we could be that critical for people trying to put out these videos. But I mean, you need to research your safety before you're going to do this, right? So I found some videos online of some guys, adjusting the rings but they were doing bare hands too, like you're saying, right? Which is a horrible way of doing it. I fortunately know these types of dangers. I mean, I've worked on some guitar tube amps in the past, and they only step up to about 450 volts, and I zapped myself with the B plus voltage a few times. It's pretty bad, right? Luckily, it's a current limited supply. There's a 4.7K resistor in line with 450 volts, but that still hurts. So I remembered that. So I have these electrician's gloves, right? I had these long rubber gloves that I used when I calibrated my CRT. I put up an article about it on my site, and I put these big, huge warnings on the top. You will die. Don't do this. So.
Yeah, or you'll get seriously hurt. I mean,
exactly.
What people need to realize is the tube that we're talking about, for all intents and purposes, it's just one large glorified capacitor. Mm-hmm. Okay, and it holds a charge of several joules. It's huge. It's huge. And as a matter of fact, even if you discharge one and you put it to the side, let it sit there for a while, the rotation of the Earth and the poles and the magnetic poles of the Earth will slowly charge that son of a bitch back up. So I know that I'm kind of beating this into the ground here, but CRT safety is super, super, super important. And even though people might not be well versed, René, in these topics, and they want to help and make a video, if you're making videos that are talking about safety that totally discount all best practices for CRT safety, you probably don't have any business making videos informing anyone about CRTs, period. That's my point.
Yeah. Maybe I wasn't super clear. Is what I mean is because there's a lack of information, that's probably what's motivating these people to actually make videos about this. But I don't think that excuses the fact at all that these are completely videos that are filled with misinformation.
Ask anybody in the arcade business, ask anybody who just regularly services and calibrates CRTs. And when you see somebody in a video who is a claimed safety video, and they've got their hand and they're just moving the anode cup, they're moving the anode cup around with their hand, without any sort of knowledge of it being charged or discharged as far as the video is concerned, they're going to laugh and they're going to say, this guy's going to get somebody hurt. They're going to get someone's dick is going to fall right off.
So could I ask 2 questions?
No.
First is probably very dumb, but bear with me on this one. So you said that the cracks in the rubber and that sound that you hear when your CRT is turning on, that's a result of that. From the perspective of isolation only when you're turning it on, not isolation so you can touch it with your hand, simply for turning it on. Is there some kind of like industrial strength rubber cement or something that you could paint over that to try and help seal it, or is that just rotted out?
Let me tell you what we used to do back in the day. When first of all, the supply chain for a lot of these CRT components has been drying up for the past 10 or 15 years. And if you're not Bob Roberts, you don't have a deep inventory of a lot of these parts. Bob Roberts, by the way, is the real Bob Roberts. He is the guy who pretty much has the arcade monitor part warehouse in the United States as far as I'm concerned. If you need a rare part, you go to Bob Roberts. Nonetheless, certain flyback transformers simply aren't available anymore for some of these not so common chassis. Mm-hmm. What we used to do is when the rubber would crack and start to separate, I mentioned earlier that arcing sound, that tick, 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 that's the arcing. That's the arcing sound that I'm talking about. We would take a non-conductive rubber-based epoxy and we would pot and try to seal. and people still do this to this day, I'm sure. I know in the arcade repair world, they did this since the 80s. But we would pot and we would try to fill in all of those cracks on that flyback and any of those rubber components to reestablish insulation in these super high voltage components. So yes, you can use certain epoxies to repot these to seal them back.
So I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, but just once again, if you do that, that doesn't mean that you could grab it with your hand. I'm just simply meaning for the arcing. But I think I've seen arcade monitors before that, what we make fun of is the hot glue on the back of a mod. It kind of almost looked like that, but it was definitely epoxy and not hot glue. And I kind of wondered why they did that, and now that's the answer apparently. So.
Yeah, cool. I mean it's that, and as far as the anode cup is what he was touching, not the flyback transformer so much, but the anode cup, right where the port is on the CRT, where the charge and the discharge derive from. The problem with the anode cup is not only might it not be cracked, but it's been under years of heat and duress from high voltage. Mm-hmm. The rubber might not be so elastic anymore, and it might not have a good seal on the back of the bowl, what we call the bell. On the bell, that seal might not be so great on the bell anymore. So there might be not so much a crack in the rubber, but separations, air gaps between the bell of the CRT and the actual anode cup itself. So if you get something that's attracted to, like somebody's hand, and you get close to one of those cracks where there's a separation between the CRT and the anode cup, you're going to see fucking Doc Brown lightning streaks come out, and your hand's going to get ignited. I mean, I've seen this.
1.21 gigawatts up your ass.
Up my ass, motherfucker. Yeah. The rule has always been you stand up. If you're wearing a ring, you take the ring off, you put your hand in your pocket, and you take your discharge utility, and you sneak it under that anode cup, and you wait for the pop, and you discharge and disperse that current into the frame. You never get.
That's it. That's a general rule of thumb for all electrical work: is you put one hand in your pocket. You never put both hands in there.
When working with this, you never just get back here where the anode cup is, and you're just like, "It's safe. It's safe. Ridiculous. I'm done. I'll get off my soapbox. There's another CRT.
The ratings just skyrocketed.
I wanted to move this along to a related. So Bob had sent that, and then kind of separately we got tagged on a post from Ty Laurie.
Yeah, that's actually my second question, Nick.
It's a Hackaday article that was posted yesterday, which has a lot bigger reach. Significantly more reach than a guy with 91 YouTube followers, about turning CRT TVs into an arcade monitor.
Right. So, Zach, here's my second question for you. According to this article, from your expertise, all four of you guys, your expertise and your knowledge over the years, exactly what is the proper procedure for licking your finger and sticking it on the chip to find the RGB lines? Would you care to elaborate a little bit on that?
Depends on your diet during that day.
Yeah, so
I'm up to Sapporo at the point.
So I want to read this. It's very relevant to the discussion here. So I'll just read verbatim from the article here. All CRT TVs contain high voltages, and on some the circuit boards aren't even mains isolated, so take care if you try this. Jason certainly doesn't claim that the method he demonstrates will work on whatever old TV you happen to have kicking around, but the general idea and some of the techniques he shows off are applicable to most modern TVs and can help you tailor the method to your particular piece of gear. It all starts with a wet finger. Seriously. Jason demonstrates a rather unique way of determining which pins on the TV's control chip are responsible for the individual color signals by wetting his finger and sliding it over the pins. When a change in color is seen on the displayed image, you know you're getting close. We can't say it's the most scientific or even the safest method, but it worked for him. Now...
And it can work for you, too.
Now, Jason might be a seasoned expert at doing this, and he knows he's going over a low voltage part, but this is fucking horrible. This is terrible advice to put on. It's just grossly irresponsible to tell people to just start licking their finger and dragging it over traces on the back of a fucking CRT.
So we're going to take our spit and we're going to short these pins out, and as soon as the display responds, we'll know what colors we're getting.
This is so bad.
You know what you just read, Nick? It sounds like those ads on Facebook that go, this single mom figured out how to make $10,000 a day.
Yes.
Major corporations hate her. Click on here to figure it out.
Yeah, that was. I took the screenshot of that and I asked, this part's a joke, right? And this guy John, I don't know who he is, but he said, no, that's what he does. He has years of experience and knows what he's doing.
No, he doesn't. Let me explain.
He might. I don't know who
years of finger licking experience.
I don't know who this Arcade John is. He may have experience, but this is not something that you should be telling people to do in an instructional video, kind of like Brasso.
Nobody, but hold on a second, Nick.
No, Nick. The worst thing you could do with Brasso is hurt your game.
I agree. This is worse.
You can't fucking kill somebody with Brasso unless you fucking pour it down their throat and make them swallow it.
But you know what I don't understand? You know what I don't understand about?
Your volume's gone.
You're off again. You're muted.
He can't hear us either.
So Nick's point was that there is a line that you draw between you doing stuff on your own, and then going and saying hey, you should do it like this too. And there's
as
a line.
Soon as you make a video about it, demonstrating something, you are implicitly trying to teach somebody whether you like it or not. You can't just fall back on. Well, this is how I do it, and I'm not telling you that you should lick your finger and do this, so don't blame me. I think that's BS in both cases.
What I don't understand is if the motivation is to just take a consumer-grade CRT television and you want to drive that for arcade equipment, Why even worry about the goddamn chassis on there? Drive the guns directly and work it out and shape it out. If you really know what you're doing, you're just going to drive those electron guns directly, and you're not going to worry about going through the fucking licking your cock and sticking it on the fucking part on the board. Just drive the guns directly and don't mess with any of that. I mean, why would you do that if you've got access to the guns there? Can anyone answer that?
Yeah, you answered the question in your statement. You said, if you know what you're doing.
Oh, well, excuse me. I've got years of experience.
Now I feel like I have to be Mr. Cunt Master here and pass around my newly learned skills. But all kidding aside, if you have a cheap scope, can't you just ground it and tap the pins until you see that that signature line on the screen?
Well,
that's what I told you to do.
If you hit a high voltage line with your scope, you're gonna blow it though.
All right.
But what you can do if you want to figure out, you're gonna have three. You typically probably send some sort of emitter follower configuration, but you're gonna have 3 fat transistors on your neck beard. Okay, take a small resistor, maybe like a 3K or a 4K resistor. Value really isn't super important. Solder a wire to ground. Touch the end of that resistor to the base and the emitter and collector of each of these 3 transistors that you have. When the screen goes fully red, you found the pin that you need to use to drive your red signal. When the screen goes fully blue, once you short that, once you pull that transistor low, the screen will go fully blue and green, so on and so forth. And then you just figure it out. You do the math, and then you figure out what your arcade equipment needs to output to properly drive video directly through the guns. And then you don't have to lick your ass and, whatever. I mean, to me, that's the whole point of an arcade monitor anyways, is to have fun like that. I don't know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Like, why? I mean, Steve, why wouldn't you drive the guns? Why would you just, if you're going to do arcade shit, why wouldn't you just take it to the guns directly?
I don't know. I don't even see the point of just messing with that anyway. So.
the point is, the point makes perfect sense to me. If you have an arcade monitor and a really nice arcade machine that you enjoy, but the tube itself it expires, and you want to use that arcade machine and you want to bring it back, but you can't afford a rare $700 tube replacement, you can just swap a whole new chassis or television tube in, and you can get that arcade machine back online. That makes perfect sense to me if that's what you're doing it for. But if you do it for that reason, that's for one specific corner case. That is not for, I'm making this tube, this television, work with all of these different arcade systems. I'm just wanting to drive the guns directly so I can use it in this one arcade machine that I want to get back up off the ground. That's the way I look at it.
We actually talked about that on a different roundtable. You went into pretty good detail about why the use cases of that you would want to go directly to the gun and the cases that you wouldn't.
Right. For one game, I would go right to the guns.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, that the point is more, these articles are, giving guides to amateurs to do this stuff. In this case, it's take your CRT and turn it into an arcade monitor or whatever. And it's questionable if there's even a need for this for teaching an amateur to, like, if your main experience is soldering Voultar's shitty SNES board into their SNES Mini, you probably don't have enough experience to be messing around with a CRT. Like, you need a certain level of expertise and know-how to be doing this stuff. So having a beginner's guide to not killing yourself here is kind of more important than just throwing up an article that tells people to lick their finger and probe random pins.
You know what's interesting, though? That reminds me of something that was pretty cool back in the 80s. There was this game. It might have been Creatures. There was a certain part of the game. Do you remember on the Sega Genesis version of X-Men, in order to defeat the computer, you had to press the reset button?
Mm-hmm.
Well, on the Commodore 64, there was a particular game where, in order to progress and move forward, you had to lick your finger, and you had to rake your finger against like a Sega Genesis DB9 port, the second player joystick port on the Commodore 64, in order to progress. It was kind of neat. I don't know why I thought of that. Well, because we're talking about licking our units and touching electronics, but low voltage electronics, fortunately. But I don't know. when you say that you have a lot of experience, that doesn't mean anything if you're telling people in a video to lick their fingers and to touch things that conduct electricity. I'm sorry.
I could never. It just blows me away. Like, hey, Renee, what voltage are you running in your house? Why don't you fucking spin your dick and stick it in the socket and see what fucking happens? Like, it's, I know you guys are rolling your eyes at me, but is it really that much of a difference between saying lick your finger and stick it on a live circuit board? What the fuck is wrong with people?
Renee's dead, but at least we know that's the living room light.
We do fun things. We do fun things to test low voltage electronics all the time. We'll take compressed air. We'll freeze stuff to see if something's failing. It's not conducting. Using your finger as a small conductor to short things around to find responses on a screen. That's not exactly a bad thing. But telling people blindly this is how I do it. You don't have to follow me, and they might get into a high voltage system somewhere where they're doing that. No.
Yeah.
No.
It's no good.
That's the point. It's not the act. It's the delivery, in my opinion.
In conclusion, don't read Hackaday.
Yeah.
Did we want to? Do we even care about the Atari VCS? You just mentioned that it's.
I don't care about that.
Yeah.
It's funded, so it means we'll all soon know how it's probably gonna suck.
I don't care about the VCS. I don't care about the Intellivision.
Or it might never come out.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I don't know how this thing got $2.2 million dollars in a day, but
Nostalgia.
it's kind of sketchy to me. Nostalgia, but like everyone in this community has been mocking the hell out of this thing. Like, who is backing this?
Everybody who's not in this community who doesn't understand there's options and a difference.
I want to bring up an important point here, and I feel a lot of the people I talk to retro gaming. A lot of the people I talk to about retro gaming feel this way. Is I like retro gaming up until, or down until the NES. Anything before NES, I feel is too primitive, and it sucks, and the controller is weird or whatever. And I don't even like anything before NES. So I really don't care about stuff like Atari 2600 or.
Yeah, I mean, it's a historical
thing
thing more than anything, like to see the progression. But I don't really care about Atari, the company, putting out a modern console where you can play these old games, and then plus, I don't know who's going to develop for this thing. I don't see what the point is.
I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know what their edge is with this device either, other than the name. What does it have?
Nothing.
So
And Renee, I agreed with your whole perspective on that. The one thing, if Scott were here, he'd backhand me because he loves the 2600. But the one thing I will say is there are certain experiences. So if like you use the paddle controllers, the 2-player paddle controllers, stuff like that, like it is pretty neat because you can't really do that on a lot of the other consoles because they were just experimenting and seeing what hardware accessories they could, throw at it. But yeah, I generally, and I respect the shit out of it. I don't have fun playing the most pre-NES consoles.
Yeah, me neither.
A game or two here and there, but
Well, I love.
I mean, I don't even have fun playing 80% of the titles on NES either. So it's like, it was still an era where they were working things out. But it's interesting from a historical perspective to me, at least. But this thing, I have no interest in. I don't know why it exists. I
don't even know what it is. Can you give me a basic rundown?
So they teased this like last year. They were about to run an Indiegogo, and they backed out on the last day.
An Android box with an Atari name on it.
Yeah, that's basically it. And real wood.
Can it take carts?
No. It's gonna be like a online thing. Got some similar features to what was that thing? The
Ouya?
Well, yeah, it's similar to the Ouya. It's also got a few features what's that modular console that I can't remember.
Polymega.
Yeah, the Polymega, where like it's got things built in so you can stream directly from the console. Not the Super CD.
The thing was an abysmal failure. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So how is this different from like the flashback stuff?
Well, it's running a Linux distro, and it's got a nice
Okay.
front end on it, and you can get online with it and download other games, and sort of they're boasting that there's going to be some sort of online community experience to go along with it.
So the flashbacks use some sort of ASIC then? Like
Yeah, an
like-
Atari on a
like-
chip.
Yeah. Okay.
That's right. With the TIA and the and everything on a chip.
So this is using like RetroArch emulation.
Yeah.
It's using some Linux. It's got a Linux
Probably.
distro with some sort of front end. I'm sure they've taken.
And the
Allegedly.
cheapest you could get this thing for, including a joystick, is $230 plus shipping,
Whoa.
which is like,
Whoa!
you
I
know,
was imagining under $100.
no, for under $100 you could get a joystick with no system, system with no controllers. Early bird price is $200, but then it goes up to $300 after that.
Oh, great! A system
God.
that's going to lose
So
all support
it's
after
more
6
like-
months of launch.
Yeah, after this early bird pricing wears off, this thing is more expensive than a Nintendo Switch, which I just don't understand. I mean, at least with the Nintendo Switch, you can play all of your old Wii U games in definitive editions. I don't know what you'll be able to play on this thing.
Pong,
Yeah,
Hot Rod,
$300 or $400 game of Pong.
Kaboom. I mean, the sky's the limit.
Anyway,
So now we have to say thank you to our sponsors over at Atari VCS.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Actually, before we get on to the Q&A, I would like to say thank you to our sponsors over at Atari. Atari, making stuff that nobody wants.
What about Eon? They did sponsor 15 seconds of this podcast. We've got to talk about them.
Eon sponsored the window that surrounds just Zach, but well, I guess
And
also
René.
Renee.
No, I got
And
one
René.
too.
Yes, so the middle.
I still have never heard from these people before.
I really like this. I really like this packaging. So
I've actually
so
been
good.
playing my Game Boy Advance games now.
It's awesome. It works really well. I mean, for what it is, a turnkey product that you don't have to fuck with, and it's available to buy. As far as its presentation goes and everything like that, I've really enjoyed this. I honestly can say that I have really enjoyed this, and maybe when Steve comes back over, we'll enjoy it together. If Woozle would ever get off his ass, I don't know if he's going to. I think he will. I know him.
I want to ask people in the chat. When I play with the Eon GCHD on my 4K Samsung, 480p doesn't look that great. But I mean, this looks tremendous if I capture it in the data path. So I know this thing's not at fault. So I just want to get, if there's someone else in the chat or one of you guys that has a 4K Samsung, does it deal with 480p nicely? I mean, I think my TV does a shit job at upscaling 480p.
I don't know. Badass Console said something kind of interesting in the comments. He said, "How can you be such a sellout after I even told you all the issues with it?" Well, let me just make something perfectly clear. I'm not selling out. This is a product that's actually available, and I enjoyed it. And you know, I'm not trying to be mean, but I'm looking forward to what he does too. But I mean, the issues that it has, I don't think really affect me. It works well. The colors look good enough for me, I guess. René, did you see anything glaringly off?
The only complaint I'll have, and I think it's a really minor complaint, is when I plugged it into the GameCube, it didn't work. I got nothing out of the output, and it's just because the plug is really tight, right? So I had to
Yeah.
really snap it in there.
We
Yeah,
discussed
it's
this when we
almost like
first tore it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like we had this conversation
Yeah.
one time.
And that's the only
Hold on a
complaint
second.
I
Hold on a
have.
second. You did not address the known issues. The known issues according to whom? The colors looking good enough. So I guess there's some sort of conversion issue, maybe between the wrong coefficients were used for digital YCBCR and what they're trying to do in analog space. I don't know. It's something to that effect. Maybe it has some problems, but I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the only. I talked to Badass Consoles about this before too. He pointed out, I think, what's the name of the game? Eternal Darkness. You can see like a slight color shift on the the screen it's got like the face. I think it's like it's either normally gray and it looks green, or it's normally green and looks gray. I don't remember.
It was blue. It looks green and it's supposed to be blue, and it's blue and it's supposed to be green. Yeah, there's a color difference in Sanity's Requiem. I remember him telling me that. That's exactly what he told me.
Yeah,
what about the Game Boy interface issues though? Aren't there a whole bunch of compatibility issues with the Game Boy interface? Extrems fixed some of those specifically for this, I think.
Yeah, I just ordered one of those SD converters that goes into the memory card, so I'm going to be able to start using that really soon. So I'll be able to test that.
Use memory card slot number 2.
Okay, I'll remember that.
Yeah, me and Steve ran into that.
Say that again, Steve.
Use memory card slot number 2 for that SD thing.
Huh.
Because we were having a lot of problems when we were running it on slot 1. Like, I think there's some communication error because I think it's bit banging stuff or whatever. It doesn't matter. You have a memory card in slot 1 anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
No, Steve, that probably explains. It was one of those things where that probably explains some issues I had with my SD loader.
Yeah, it would sometimes boot. It sometimes wouldn't boot. Sometimes it was a half boot. Sometimes full boot, and it was put it in slot 2.
Yeah, Smoke Monster says to use old 2 gig cards. I have a stockpile of those, so I'll be fine.
But your 480p question, René, that you first started off on, I don't. Some things scale stuff differently because you're doing 480p. That's a lot more going up to 2160p. So even though it's integer, you're still running it through a filter. So
yeah, it does a shit job at filtering. I tested the same thing where I plugged the Dreamcast into the OSSC and output straight 480p from the OSSC, and it does the same kind of thing. So I know it's the TV that's messing with it.
So I wouldn't necessarily say it's doing a poor job of filtering, but it's doing probably a good job filtering for upscaling normal video content, but not for upscaling this graphics generated, type of hard edge pixel stuff.
So for my use case, it does a poor job. There we go.
Yeah.
This TV does 2 things. It does Skype when we're chatting, and then it plays games. So.
Well, cool. I'm looking forward to seeing Michael's custom firmware. So I don't know.
Me too.
I don't know the other issues. He mentioned the color ones to me before, which didn't seem a huge deal. Like, you're not going to bother you if you don't know about it. Maybe even if you know about it, it's probably not going to bother you. But sounds like there are more issues. So I'm kind of interested to see what else he fixes there.
I'm looking forward to the analog outputs. I'm looking forward to RGB output from all consoles. That's the thing for me. I can't wait to use the Game Boy interface through this RGB into my BVM. I'm going to just be fucking giggling the entire time. It's awesome.
It's awesome.
I guess some other thing we could say, too, is the fact that we have the GCHD here doesn't mean that I don't want the other solution as well. I think the other solution, from the sounds of it, is going to be superior. And it's the same reason why, I have some EverDrives that I think are designed poorly. If newer versions come out that are designed properly, I'm going to buy the newer version, right?
Absolutely.
Mean that when you buy a product, it doesn't mean that you declare this is the end-all meets-all, and I'm not going to upgrade to something better when it eventually comes out.
René, stop being a sellout.
I've used this analogy before, but it's exactly like Elon. In musicians. It's just like with bands, though, right? Like when a band gets a new member, and they're like, "Oh my God, we have such a great drummer." Inevitably, somebody's going to be like, "Oh, so that means you think the other drummer sucked?" Like, no, we're just saying this guy's a great drummer or girl, whatever. Like, so yeah, I mean, I talked about how much I loved the Woozle's Game Boy Advance HDMI, but by saying that, I'm not saying fuck Extrems' Game Boy interface. I'm just simply stating that I loved Woozles. So
there's a problem just in basic society that you don't understand that 2 things could be true at the same time with a lot of this stuff. So
well, it's never. I mean, we shouldn't get emotional about it. Look, I mean, if there are other firmware things that need to be corrected, maybe that I'm not privy to, maybe we should talk about that more and have that information so that I mean, it can be communicated so people know and are better informed. I just know of the color space conversion issue that wreaks that has some sort of penalties on a couple of games like Sanity's Requiem, Eternal Darkness. Other than that, I really can't think of anything other than some color space issues that might be flawed with his firmware. So I think the other thing will be fantastic too.
I like how you use the subtitle before the main title.
Yeah.
So like solid Metal Gear.
Yeah.
Judgment Day, Terminator 2.
That's right. That's right.
I'm gonna start doing that.
Let's go on to questions. Let's start with could you do an explainer of SCART versus component and talk about what quality differences, which we've talked about a million times, and what the 21 pins are for on SCART. So quality difference, component and SCART are equivalent in almost all cases. There are some color space things. Go watch old videos where we talk about that. But for reasonable purposes, YPBPR and RGB are the same. So now 21 pins. I think this guy's point was that there are people out there that have the impression that, well, first of all, they're kind of confusing SCART and RGB, that SCART is superior because it has all these pins is sending all this data. And when I initially responded to this question, I pointed out that actually you're not using all of those pins for the data that you need to transmit video. They're available, and you don't want to be sending more information across those pins than you actually need, right? So you start throwing more and more signals down that line. You could stuff all 21 pins with stuff, but that's just going to create more chance for interference between lines. So you really want to send the minimum number of signals across your wires necessary to get what you're going for. You don't want to unnecessarily send additional sync signals across, for instance, or something.
Right.
I don't know if there's anything we else want to add towards that.
Yeah,
Well,
I want to add. Nick wasn't going to say it, but I mean, component cables are much better than the SCART cables.
Okay, so what I was gonna
RGB
say
for life, bitches.
So what I was gonna say that this is a very nuanced thing, and somebody who wants to know all the little technical things and in what scenarios this is better, what scenarios this is better, and there's a lot of myths and stuff out there. Nick was actually like, this was like a year and a half ago. He still has this draft up. Like he's like, I want to make a blog series, just like kind of explaining all this stuff, maybe like 3 to 5 different posts, like explaining all these little differences and where it matters and where it doesn't matter, and kind of have, real technical answers to things and not just like fanboy stuff.
Right.
And so eventually we'll probably still do that because no one has done it yet. So in the future we might have like a really detailed explanation of everything.
That's good.
Yeah, but once you go full component, you never go back.
So yeah, I mean, of course, you have to make the difference or the distinction between SCART and RCA, which RCA is obviously a far superior connector, no question. And then
yeah,
but BNC is better too than RCA.
Sure, yeah, another type of connector. And then YPBR, PBPR versus RGB, where you're talking microscopic differences, if any. So it's just that RGB and SCART kind of get used interchangeably. But those extra 21 pins are not granting you quality. Most of them aren't being used in most cases.
I think the problem is a lot of people confuse they confuse video formats with interface types. You know what I mean? Like when you hear, you'll hear people say SCART. Like I had my Nintendo 64 SCART modded, and you're like, what the fuck does that even mean? Oh, obviously it's synonymous with RGB, right?
Yeah, but you could send RGB over RCA
right
connectors.
You could send composite over SCART.
Yeah.
That's right.
actually like what the SCART was. It was like a analog
Universal.
precursor to like HDMI,
Right.
where it has like everything in there, and you just plug it and don't worry about it, and it works.
You know, I was told by somebody several years ago that the reason RGB was never adopted on the consumer level here in the States is because they couldn't get together and they couldn't agree on an interface form factor. And that's, well, this video is good enough. We have it here. We'll just stick with that.
I believe that because
crazy.
there's like in one of the books that I constantly reference, video books, there's a chart of different YPBPR standards. There's like a few different ones, and actually in these BVM and PVM menus you could set which one to use. And if anybody wants to know, like the one that's equivalent to consumer is the one that says SEMTI or /N10, then the letter
Because
N and 10.
The coefficients are slightly different, right, Steve? Is that the problem?
It's not coefficients. It's more of like amplitudes of the sync versus if there is a step, a blanking step. You know, that's 7.5 IRE.
Oh yeah, IRE.
setup pedestal.
Okay.
And how high the video can swing, and then how high the PB and PRs can swing versus how high the Luma can swing, and it's just a giant mess. And they only really standardize it in the consumer world, but one of those professional standards corresponds to the consumer one. And whatever, we talk about this too much. Whatever.
That's good information. I mean, a lot of people probably would like to know that.
Yeah, we talked about it before. It's SEMTI/N10. Some of them have a switch on the back, some of them have a menu.
Well, I didn't know. I thought that the color space formulae, the reason that it was off is because the coefficients used for that were different for their sort of proprietary, whatever their format is. That's what I thought. So you told me something that I didn't know.
Yeah. No, the standard def stuff is, the coefficients are pretty set in stone. It's when you move to high def and ultra high def, whereas they stuff up.
I have a slightly tangent question here, Steve. So how do all those standards mix in with in the OSSC, another sponsor, menu? How you can select between like a color space for a component that one of them is labeled 701 and the other one is 601?
So that's what Zach was talking about. So the 601 is a standard def. 709 is the
709. Okay.
Is the high def. So anything that's 720p or 1080i should or 1080p should assume 709. I'm pretty sure that probably the OSSC does that automatically. There's probably an auto setting, maybe. I'm not 100% sure, but that's what you should do is base it on the resolution, and then ultra high def uses like 1366 or something like that. It's slightly different than 709, and they kind of created this whole mess because like CRT phosphors changed over the years, and they're trying to but it was, in the end, it just causes a mess because when you start scaling stuff and changing resolutions, then you got to change coefficients. So if you're like in YCBR space for 480p and you upscale it to 720p, you got to apply a correction matrix to correct it to 709, and it's just
and maybe that's relative to what Badass Consoles is doing with his firmware with his GC video.
Could be, yeah.
You know what? This starts to really fall into place if you use OBS and you try to do high quality captures and stuff, because you have to set the input settings correctly. So, if and this is one of the funny things, right? So if I'm using the HD Retrovision cables directly and then I switch to SCART, if it's the same signal, if I do these screenshots, they're going to look identical, but I have to make sure all the settings are set properly. So, yeah, it's still hard for me to grasp sometimes.
It's not your fault. Like, if anybody ever reads like this book I was referencing, it's Charles Poynton. I forgot the title of the book, but
Darwinism.
HDTV algorithms and interfaces, maybe. But he complains constantly, like he's got like all his opinions screwed out across the book. There, it's like, this is so stupid. They didn't keep the coefficients the same. and like gamma, like people change brightness and contrast. They don't mean the same thing as they did before. They're all idiots. It's pretty hilarious.
All right, next question. Why is 1 volt peak-to-peak sync, or I guess any non-standard sync, a thing? Most pro equipment and consoles use TTL for combined sync, and VGA is spec TTL, so why does anyone deviate? Is it just to support Shark TVs?
I think he means why is there a 300 millivolt peak-to-peak? And there's a side thing that SCART is allowed to swing to 1 volt, but I think he's saying why is sync like this small thing, where in VGA it's a full 5 volt TTL. Like, why not just make all that stuff also 5 volt TTL, since the consoles, some of them output it like that, the C sync like that.
I can answer that, or you can answer it, Steve.
I talk too much. So
I think I could be wrong on this, but I think the reason that sync lives where it lives, and the reason it's different between the VGA standard and NTSC and PAL broadcasting is because composite video, for example, if you look at the waveform of a composite video line of active video and the back porch and the color burst and where sync actually lives, sync lives at between 0 and 300, and then beyond that are other parts of the signal. Steve, you answered this. I'm going to screw this up.
I think that's part of it, where like the original video signals were composite and they had the sync embedded,
right?
And it was a certain amplitude. And when we start separating that out, you usually in the studio you have RGB and sync, and then you combine it all into this composite video. And so you want them at that voltages, so when you combine them, everything fits together in a nice composite video, or S video or whatever, like that. I think the other reason is for length, because if you're driving a sync line just from your computer's video card to the monitor, like 3 to 6 feet, you can get away with a really high swing signal that's terminated high impedance, versus if you're running 10s and 20s feet like in the studio or something, and you need to drive that over a impedance controlled line into a 75 ohm load. You don't want to drive a full 5 volts through that. Not only are you going to get interference, you're going to get, it's going to mess up the signal, and you're going to need big termination resistors to support all that current you're dumping. So it's like a waste of a lot of different things. So those are my two answers, basically.
I think that makes more sense what my answer was. My answer was they modeled it. The C-Sync was predicated on the sort of the color and the encoded video waveform, where sync lives in amplitude, where the luma lives in amplitude, where chroma lives in the amplitude, where active video, all that stuff. And they just sort of, in order to combine that more effortlessly, they could just put everything at these amplitudes, and then they could just jam it all in and make one signal without having to do a bunch of shit. Probably wrong.
I think that's the main reason, and I was just giving a side reason too.
Side pussy, yes.
All right, here's a question. Can we show the inside of an HD Retrovision cable? Is that something you have handy, Steve?
I was going to take photos of that, because that was something I was going to put on her PlayStation 2 page.
Okay.
Well, you don't need photos. Didn't that guy already post your schematic
No,
online?
this is the shielding.
He's talking about like the cabling.
Yeah.
I have he wants a cross section of the cabling, which I was gonna do to compare that with even like the Sony OEM PS2 cables, because they don't have the foil, which I think prevents a lot of audio crosstalk.
So we'll post that on our PlayStation page.
It's been on my workbench for many months, so maybe a few more months.
Yeah, we'll work on that. Can Voultar explain why Windex is bad to use for cleaning cartridges?
I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say that using Windex is a great practice. The problem with Windex is, and from my own personal experience, is that I don't know if the formula has changed over the years, but about 7 or 8 years ago when I was not working for but spending a lot of time at a game store, they used Windex quite liberally on trade-ins, on games they were putting on the shelf. And I noticed something after about a couple of months of them doing that and games sitting on the shelves. Either they weren't cleaning the Windex off altogether, and there was some residual left, or something else was going on. But I think the perfumes in Windex might, in fact, be reacting to the probably 0.5 micron thick gold flashing on a lot of those NES carts. Because after they would clean those carts with Windex, that day they would look phenomenal. But after a month or two of the same game sitting on the shelf for sale, we would take the game off, and the gold that nice layer of flashing would almost be stripped, and you would just have bare metal. Yeah, I don't know. This is super weird.
Was it stripped, or did it just have a film on it? Because I've seen.
No, it wasn't a film. It wasn't a film. That sort of protective flashing that they put over the of the fingers where the keep out is, it was totally gone. It was completely gone off of the fingers, and that is why I don't recommend Windex. Maybe if you were to use Windex and then cut the Windex with maybe IPA or something. I don't know why you would use Windex in the first place. Use a spirit. Don't use a solvent. Isopropyl alcohol is a spirit. Use that. If that's not going to get it, Windex isn't going to get it.
I thought the proper thing to do was to actually dip it in Windex and then dip it in bleach and then smell it really hard to make sure. Sorry.
I could just send you some bleach, Bob, if you want to sniff it.
Yeah. But I mean, that is from my opinion, comes from a personal observation. Things may have changed, but from what I saw with Windex, yeah.
All right.
I don't know.
Sorry. Go ahead, Zach.
I was just going to say, I don't understand this fascination with all these different sort of solvents and metal polishes. If IPA is not going to do it, then you need some mechanical abrasive force to clean a game. You're not going to be able to chemically convert something or use a chemical abrasive without having, more often than not, drastic repercussions to the actual connector itself. That's all I was going to say. We can move on.
Yeah. Nick, so like the first two questions we have are like holdovers from like a month ago, so yeah, I don't know if you wanted to...
I was jumping back to the... Okay, so there's a question on how do you basically test an AC adapter to know if it's good quality, and that's not a trivial question to answer on a stream like this, right? Like we pretty much would need to hook up an OSSC and do like a full video to talk about that, but
I think he was probably saying like how do you like look at it on a scope and stuff like that. I mean, that's still very involved. You hook up the adapter to like some test load, so you need like complicated big load resistors, and then you got to know what you're doing with the scope, and
you're measuring noise and
so maybe, I don't know, look at Bob's scope video, and maybe in the future Bob might post something on how to do that.
Yeah, how to put a supply under a load and measure noise and ripple effect and all that stuff. That's the key. It's all about the load, boys.
Yeah.
You put on your...
I'm using a retro gaming cable C-Sync Mega Drive 2 SCART cable into a G-SCART switch into an OSSC. I had no issues with sync drops before using the SSDS, SDS, SS3. When I was using René's graphics booster with the same cable switch in the OSSC, I've not tried turning the sync LPF back on and then lowering the sync voltage threshold. Is there a benefit to turning that on and lowering the threshold? Basically trying to figure out what's going on, like why he's getting drops.
So he had his like PC engine hooked up with René's thing into OSSC. Boom, worked great. Then got the SDS emulator,
S3.
and then put it and now he's having problems with the OSSC.
That's obvious. I know
Sync
exactly
drops.
why he's having problems.
Mhm.
It's because they're using how to say this? They're using combinational logic to
I think
combine. Is this a
the
V2 or a V1? First of all,
I thought it was a V2.
now if it's a V2,
Yeah,
It doesn't say in the question.
I think there was a follow-up thing to it that said it was a V2. Assume it's a V2.
assuming it's a V2, let's just let's take a look here at this V2. Right here in my hands and my butt, we got a V2. The composite sync signal is not buffered, believe it or not, through the 7374.
Right. That's right.
Interestingly enough, composite video is. But composite sync, the only reason I can think of that it wouldn't work with the OSSC is if perhaps maybe the cable that you're using isn't current limiting that output. In other words, is there a resistor in your cable?
Yeah. Yeah, so that I remember that they're running it through a logic. They're running it through a comparator, and then the
Right.
comparator is being driven directly out through a 0 ohm resistor out the back. So you're getting 5 volts with, whatever few ohms of.
Yeah, there was a time where Retro Gaming Cables was selling C-Sync cables with 75 ohms on that line and not 470.
Mhm.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry, guys. Forgive me. This is not a. This is. I'm totally wrong. It doesn't matter. The boards. You know what's interesting between the V1 and the V2? Like this is in this TurboGrafx 16. That's a V2. This is a V1. All of the components with the gate, with the AND gate and the OR gate to combine the sync. All that stuff is still on there, and it's still populated. And there are 0 ohm resistor links that sort of turn the old stuff that's on the board still off and direct the signals to the new circuit for the V2. I can't figure out why they did that. And they just didn't omit all of the old shit altogether.
Right, yeah, I remember all the old stuff is still there.
Well, I would have to
So-
guess that did they try to do it in a way where they didn't have to redesign the board and just repopulate the components? Or did they actually redesign the board?
I thought they redesigned the board.
They rerouted and laid out certain parts of the board, but maybe I can get this in frame. I hope I can. I hope I can be a real.
So I have more context to this
Go ahead,
question.
Steve. I won't say anything.
It is a V2, and there was more text before this because we just had the reply in the because there was some chat in text chat in the comments. But V2 OSSC get random sync drops. Notice Voultar had same random sync drops during his test P party stream with Nick. Mentioned something about a sync LPF, and he turned it from auto to off and fixed his problem. So he's wanting to know why turning auto to off fixed the problem, basically.
Oh, you mean the low pass? Okay.
Yeah.
That's a little different. Why turning the low pass filter off at the C-Sync stopped the dropouts?
Yeah, it stopped his dropouts with that, and then also why, like, René's thing, like, it worked on auto. Why he needed to put it to off on this thing to get it to work, basically.
What do you mean, René, put it to auto?
So, no, René, he had his OSSC using the graphics booster,
Okay.
and it was working on auto, fine. But then he puts this drive emulator on, and then auto doesn't work, but he switches it to off for the sync low pass filter, and now works. So why is there a difference there, basically?
Well,
I think the filter, the low pass filter, might be. How to explain this? Maybe kind of simply, and maybe kind of be right. I think the low pass filter, when you manipulate that, it may change where the OSSC is triggering or slicing off of the sync, and that is why you're getting those intermittent dropouts with it off as opposed to it being on. Maybe you're just changing the level on the OSSC of where it's looking to slice and trigger off of the sync. That's the best thing I know.
Yeah, that's the best guess I had. That's why I asked him to try changing the voltage threshold level, see if he could duplicate that behavior. But I mean, it's a weird. I mean, as long as you have a solution, then I don't know. We could speculate all day, but there's no way to know that for sure.
I think it's important to note too that René's thing, my thing, and the Super CD SSD3 derive sync very, very differently, right? they combine digitally the H and the V. And,
no, that's V1. That's V1. We're talking about V2.
Yeah, they dropped that, René, and they're just putting it. They drive a composite sync through a comparator to 5 volts out on the V2.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense to me. That's not what I told them to do, but they did that.
Comparator. Okay, I was gonna say my product has a nice sync recovery circuit. Well, sync amplifier circuit that Steve designed, actually. Thank you, Steve. That takes the video level sync on TurboGrafx and amplifies it to TTL levels.
That was my way of testing if that actually worked, by making you ship hundreds of units of it.
Can I say something really quick, super quick, since we're talking about this? I just want to be very clear because Bob knows that I get asked about this a ton still. The reason I've not released this board is because this only fixes about 90% of the problems, and plus, in order to install this board on a V1, you literally have to come into this edge connector. I know you can't see this, and you have to literally, you have to come in here and cut and isolate a couple of these pins so that you completely uncouple the analog return from the digital return. On top of that, there's a bunch of other hokey shit that you have to do. I wouldn't mind releasing this if it was easier for people to do. Secondly, look at this bullshit. The way that the Mini DIN 9 is anchored, you have to totally remove this. You need to take a Dremel and you have to haul out the goddamn grounds the way they're joined in order to isolate the Mini DIN 9 from the digital ground to the analog. When you do this, if you looked at my last stream, the video is practically perfect, but there is so much shit that you have to go through. And the lingering on the V1. Now you can do all this to the V2 as well. The V2, I'm back. The V2 has lingering problems that I've been addressing. And I mean, I'll tell you things that I've been doing. The power section is the same. I fed its own supply in. You can see those ceramics on top of those tantalums where I'm trying to take more of the edge off of the rails. You've got a 3.3 and a 5-volt rail. Steve sent over a cable, and we tried to, because their HD Retrovision cables were having performance issues to themselves. We thought that it was because it was a delivery problem with the 5-volt supply. So we powered the rectals independently with the power supply. Didn't do much of a deal. I replaced the 1 amp regulator with a 1.5 amp regulator. The problem is something high speed, and it's something digital. And I believe what the problem is on this board at this point, the residual that's left, is there's something routed poorly on here. I've isolated the SD card and all the transmission lines and return lines for it. There's something here that is coupling in, because the noise, I'm just say this real quick, the noise is only existent when the FPGA is being exercised, when it's streaming CD audio data, or when it's streaming red big audio or data in. That's when the noise comes, and you can see it when that orange light comes on and it starts reading. That's when the noise appears. So that initially indicated to me, okay, that's a supply issue. This thing's being exercised. It's pulling more current. It doesn't have the current to pull. It's being starved, and there's probably some transient issues along with that. No, that's not it, not to the best of my knowledge. So anyone who has any ideas, the Terra Onion team, I've tried to talk to them. I think they're working on other stuff. They were supposed to send me something else. They haven't. Maybe they just don't care anymore. But I've spent hours, believe me. I designed a goddamned board just for this, to fix this. It's called the FURGB, and this is the actual real board. This is just an IFU RGB board that I modify to work, but this is the actual board that's designed specifically. It works with the V1 and the V2. If anyone has any ideas, me and Steve looked at it for 2 seconds while he was here, but we wanted to jack each other off and play video games instead. So I'm still interested in looking at it. I have a bunch of
That's why I flew down there.
I know.
Didn't they say they weren't going to...
Yeah, they're not going to mess with that anymore.
Didn't they say they weren't going to improve the RGB section because quality can't be measured? So.
Yeah, that's exactly what they said.
Yeah.
Right.
So I actually, somebody local has, I think it's a Core Graphics with that's been fully recapped and a Voultar board installed. I can't remember if he said you actually installed it, Zach, or if somebody else did, but he sent pictures and it looked great. So maybe you did, or maybe somebody high quality installed it, and he offered to let me borrow it. And then a different friend offered to let me borrow the Super CDS3 or whatever, and then I lent you my my DV graphics pooper, and I need that back. But I'll actually be able to I'll be able to do the quality test on all those, and I already have my suspicions on what I'll see, but at least I'll be able to do screen caps and everything for everybody.
I'm still not convinced that it's not a. You know what's interesting? You know what? One quick second. Do you know what mainly separates the SD3 from from like the CD engine attachment, the interface unit? This is the interface unit mainboard. On the interface unit mainboard, it has its own independent supply section, and I don't know. I did some testing, but I still think that this might be a supply issue. I think they might have just did it backwards. The SD3 should have had its own independent supply, and if they wanted that to drive your TurboGrafx or your core graphics or your PC Engine equipment, it should have done that as a pass-through. But I think that maybe still yet, even though things are not suggesting this, they did it backwards, and because they did it backwards and they're having the system supply this main board, that's why we're having issues. I need more data. Steve, thoughts?
I think that's a possibility. Yeah.
I think that's an excellent idea, Zach, because when I was developing the graphics booster, I blew several fuses in all of my PC Engine and TurboGrafx consoles. I mean, now that the circuit is right, it doesn't happen, right? But this is a high-powered system, and people are inserting, SD cards and whatnot into there. And if I were to redesign the graphics booster today, I would definitely try to include an external power supply too, just because of that fuse.
I don't know. Badass Console says that he has maybe some ideas or some thoughts on it. Maybe we'll try to get some time and talk to him. Maybe he has something we can talk about. But Bob doesn't like it or whatever. But listen, this is the only optical drive emulator available for the goddamn TurboGrafx and PC
No,
Engine.
it's not that I don't like it. I love the idea behind it. I just think
Cut it some slack, Bob. I'm tired of your cock. I mean your mouth. I mean both.
For $300, I really would have wished that they had, done a release where they basically said, "Hey, we're going to do a beta, so we'll do 100 of them, get some feedback, and go from there." Kind of like what Mike Chi does. Although Mike offers to replace people's if it doesn't come out right. I think that's amazing. I wouldn't have. I would have said, "Here's 100. Buy it, knowing you're an early adopter, and let's see from here." I probably would have said 10, not 100, but whatever. I just for that price, which I think it deserves that price. I just think for that price, it should live up to everything. You know what I mean?
All right, we've done SSD S3 shit for like 18 hours on this podcast. Time to move on. I don't care anymore.
Thank you.
The least interesting product that I just don't care.
Oh, blow me. No one cares what you think.
This is kind of an interesting question. Guy wants to become an installer for like these HDMI kits that are coming out for things, but the pricing is too expensive for him to basically make any profit on his end, and he's curious whether we think that the prices of the FPGA chips in these things will come down to the point where the designers can sell them to installers for cheaper, and they can mark up and make their own.
That's not the
money.
problem at all. That's not the issue at all. The issue is really, especially with the N64 and the Ultra HDMI in a lot of respects, and I've installed literally hundreds of high-def NES kits. The problem isn't the technology being costly. The problem is it's really a matter of supply and demand. When you do things in low volume like this, and you do them in low volume increments, that's just going to drive the market up and up and up. And you can afford to sell these things, or you can get away with putting a $400 or $500 or $600 price tag on these pre-modded systems because of that, and because people are paying that much money simply because they can't easily get a hold of this stuff. That's why the price is so ungodly high, even for kids. So the real answer to that is going to be higher volume and better distribution. But right now, that doesn't work. That's not the best. That might not be what's best for the makers of this thing, because they're making more money, man.
Also, could you realistically do high volume ultra HDMI and like, or are you going to be potentially sitting on way too much inventory?
So let me ask you guys this, because this kind of parallels with that Dreamcast thing. Like the demand was so enormous that somebody just was reverse engineered it. The same thing could happen to these things. I mean, there's no patents for these things. You could copy the SPI flash that has all the bit stream for the FPGA, and you could copy all the routes and do all that. You could, but nobody has. So maybe there is not enough demand, or maybe that line hasn't been crossed.
Yeah, that's what I think it is.
Where that GDMU was very such a low line because there was only handfuls made, and so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. I think that I guess Marshall is hitting that volume kind of correctly in a way. I think
I'm not saying that he's not hitting it correctly. I'm just saying that the low volume is in fact
right.
Absolutely
the low volume
dictating
is
the prices that we're seeing.
Yeah, but if he were to go high volume, I think he would have trouble moving that many units at the speed he'd want to move them, and it's a risk, right? Like,
well, that's what I'm saying. It's not in his favor to do that.
Yeah. So
no, we're totally saying. I got you.
Yeah, it's a terrifying thing. Imagine being one person and then just saying, "All right, well, this is in a lot of demand, so fuck it. I'm gonna make like 10,000 of them. I'll take out a loan. I'll do it." And you make them, and they arrive, and either something's wrong with every one of them, or everything's perfect,
that's
and
a
you
case
start to
exactly
sell, and
right
then
now.
somebody else comes out with the 4K version 3 weeks after you just received 10,000.
That's the case
terrifying.
right now, Bob. There's a problem on the Ultra HDMI with the HDMI not being soldered properly. So he's hand fixing all these units. So like right there, that's why there's not coming out in high volume, right? Because he's just one guy and he's doing these things by hand to fix them, and so
it's low volume manufacturing problems. I mean, I think just almost everyone here has been through that.
So if you were doing something a little more high volume, that stuff there'd probably be a test jig for that it would even make it to his door like that.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree. I totally agree.
So there's a question about would we ever make adapters? Well, since our Genesis cables sold out a lot faster than SNES cables this last time, would we make adapters in the future that convert our SNES cables to these other consoles? And I already told the guy no, but I wanted to expand on a few of the reasons. One, female SNES port not readily available, and I don't know that we'd be able to easily make one that was workable in this situation. Could be expensive.
You actually need a PCB in there. So
yeah, so that could be expensive to design that and have something that worked. Whereas we can just off the shelf the mini DIN. Two, we'd have to go back and redesign all of these. Like all these adapters were designed around the Genesis cable, right? Like they have components in them that are designed around the Genesis cable, and we'd have to go and redo that. And we're not going to waste time on that. So that's two. And then just like a straight volume issue, would it be worth, minimum order quantities? We can't just order 10, 100 of these, we have to order a lot, whereas we already have kind of covered our bases with that on the Genesis side. So those are like probably the three main issues I see. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add, Steve.
I think it's interesting that one of the reasons, well, not one of the reasons, but kind of a side effect of making these adapters for Genesis was to kind of equalize SNES sales and Genesis sales, because SNES was way outselling Genesis before.
Yep.
And now it completely flipped.
Yeah, when we I think it was kind of equalized when we had just Neo Geo and Saturn.
Yeah.
And then once we introduced PlayStation, then Genesis kind of overtook everything.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Here's another HD Retrovision question, which is how are we able to do the Y splitter thing, basically, where you can
picking the questions.
Hook up basically two HD Retrovision cables to a Y splitter and not degrade quality. Whereas if you just hook up any old, so this is
we talked about this before.
We've talked about
we've
it before, but
times.
I mean, this guy might have not seen the that episode, but basically the answer is components that prevent current from feeding back into the other cable that's hooked up at the same time.
Yeah, we're doing the driving of the analog video, so I have control over that, so I was able to make it so it doesn't leak back.
Yeah, because normally if you were just to have any old two cables hooked up in this Y splitter, the one that's on is going to be leaking back into the one that's off, and not just driving the TV as you want. So there's components in the HD Retrovision cables to stop that.
For the video, but the audio, no. So that was his other question, was can I get the same effect with the audio? And that, because he started hooking up more than two, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with line level audio, because it's not terminated to some low impedance, it's like a higher impedance type of signal, that if you hook up two, you don't really notice like a different, like it's a slightly, like maybe one or two notches down on your remote on your TV. Then you start hooking up 3 and 4. You have all these audio loads in parallel. So like you have like 4 off consoles and 1 on console, and the 1 on console is going to all 4 of the off consoles in the audio section. So then it starts stacking up. And since we're not driving audio, we're passing it through. We have some protection components in line, but that's it. We're not driving the audio. I can't put that same anti-leaking thing in there for the audio.
How worthless.
Alrighty. Well, there's 2 other questions, but we've kind of run pretty long tonight, so I'm going to save them for next time. If you have any other questions, I noticed people were putting stuff in the chat, but we just had such a big backlog of questions that couldn't really get to chat stuff. So leave them in the comments on this video, and we'll add them to the list and get to them next time. I think probably next time we'll do another somebody streaming a game type deal.
I have a question for the audience. Put this in the comments too. Do you want questions answered during those things, ones that we have backlog? Because I know on this we have a section for questions, so if people just want to see questions they can skip. But on the other stream you have 2 hours of random talking, and so do you want to filter through that yourself to find answers to questions? So that's a question to the audience.
Yeah, it's something also we gotta kind of decide too. Is, I mean, do we just want to make those gaming streams us shooting the shit and talking about whatever is interesting to us? Because the whole point of those is we were kind of getting burnt out by doing, the hard technical discussions twice a month, and it's nice to just like actually talk about video games and not electrical signals. So the whole point of why all of us do this.
Sometimes I get more excited about the electrical signals than I do the video games. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in this community are like that. Like, spend hours and hours, getting that perfect setup, and then probably just never play the games. I find myself in that camp in a lot of ways. But in any case, yeah, we'll think about that. I mean, maybe if discussion slows down, we might pop in and answer some questions from the chat or something, but I think we should probably save these heavy technical stuff for episodes like this, and make the gaming streams a little more lighthearted. I don't know, we'll decide. But yeah, I think that'll be it for tonight. Check out our twatters. The links are in the description, and Yada yada.
Yeah,
yada.
it is. As soon as I'm done with this, I'm gonna go and hit send on the other video, so that scope video will be out in by 10:30 Eastern time. So everybody.
Awesome, Bob. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, sweet man. That's gonna be good.
You
Everyone
guys
should,
could all thank Steve for it. I could have never done it without him. So thank
I
you,
know.
Steve.
Thank you
so much.
for the cola and Monster Energy. You knew what it took to get me over there.
Monster. He couldn't even splurge and get you a Kickstart. What a
I know,
traitor.
seriously. Well, because you got to go to a few different places to make sure they got the right flavors.
And of course, thank you to our sponsors, Brasso, Dr. Pepper, and Atari. We
And
appreciate
Clorox.
and Clorox,
Don't
and
forget Eon.
Eon Gaming, and
Terra Onion.
and we
Terra Onion.
we at Video Game Perfection. We'll see you guys. See you guys next time.